Good afternoon, good evening, good morning to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, whether you are on live or you are joining us on demand. Thank you for joining us today on our episode. But before we begin, we have to welcome a special friend of ours, Mr. Billy Joe Wright, our HLPTA president. Welcome again, Billy Joe.
Hello, everyone. I love the beat. Like I always say, I love these effects with all the confetti. And I can't believe that this is one of our last shows that I will be president for, because we have four more months. But can I just tell you that every time I hear these topics that you both have come up with, this makes my presidency worth it. So if I don't do anything else or accomplish anything else in life, just knowing that I was president while you both got this show up and running with the important topics that you do, amazing. So thank you for allowing me to be here tonight. And can I introduce Ron?
Yes.
Oh, please
Yes, you
do.
can. Please
do.
I would love to introduce Ron. I've said it how I feel about Ron before. So let me just straight out just say, welcome Ron, our HLP USD coordinator for ethnic studies and more, leading the way forward. Ron Espiritu.
Hey, Billy Joe, good to see y'all. Good to see you, Ricardo and Teresa. Happy to be here.
Hey, good to see you. And I always frustrate Ricardo and Teresa because I take more time than I really should.
That's not true.
But I did want to throw something out there, Ron, to you and to this group. Is, we're doing this culturally inclusive show and teaching and kind of, trying to bring these items forward. And I wanted to just throw out there to you all and just quickly get your opinions. How do we take this deeper? How with our members do we make it more than just learning and leaving the subconscious act of, hey, here's a couple of weeks or a month, or the people that will celebrate Black History Month but won't celebrate Black Lives Matter week and extend that meaning from a week to every day? How do we take it to learning, to reflection, to action? So I don't want to put you on the spot, but as we have this conversation today and we're celebrating things, I wanted just to throw that out there to you and get your quick opinions on that. So any of you have any ideas?
I'm looking at
Who's going
Mr.
first?
Espiritu. Honestly, I'm not the expert here, but I'm gonna say I've been seeing it happen as I see our ethnic studies teachers. Now that I've seen them up close and see what they do and see the kind of conversations that they've been having with our students, I can see it happening. It's happening right now, but I know Mr. Espiritu has a bigger vision for the future, and I'm sure he has a lot more insight on that.
Yeah, and
Go ahead, Ricardo.
as I get to work with Ron and I see our ethnic studies teachers, and actually going this week to an elementary school with Ron and seeing the excitement of our teachers, elementary teachers, seeing Ron and seeing his vision for maybe the first time, and saying this is one of the best PDs I've ever attended. It's really, really exciting to see that. And also, I think today is going to be the star as we have these conversations with our amazing guests today, and hopefully we can continue to have him and continue to take him into the classroom, not just talking about it, but actually doing.
Thanks, y'all. Yeah, thank you. I mean, Billy Joe, thanks for the question too. I mean, I don't have an easy response, but I think what comes to my mind is practice. Like, how do we practice these conversations so that we get used to them? We build the muscle. We build the muscle to be comfortable with our own identities, to be comfortable with our own positionalities, to own who we are in our stories, right? Which is something that's been coming out of this show, which I love. And then in terms of our school sites and our practice, it really is like trying on the conversation, making mistakes, finding safe spaces for us as adults to make mistakes as we navigate people's different identities and different points of views and perspectives, and then giving that same opportunity for our students. And so I always appreciate those conversations with you, Billy Joe, because you are always honest and straightforward. And I think that's what we need to do as we navigate these conversations about race and racism, about identity, about culturally relevant or culturally responsive teaching practices. And I'm very excited about what it's been like working in the school district HLPUSD. Ricardo mentioned we were at Nelson Elementary yesterday, and just so much excitement from the teachers, and so much positive energy around saying like, "Hey, we're proud of our school." They say that they say and they believe, and I believe the students believe and the parents believe the best school in the universe, right? So as we embody that and think about that, it's also about being confident with who we are, who our families are, who our parents are, who our guardians are, our own stories, and then being willing to learn from others and be in a place of listening. So
Well,
yeah, I love the
I would
question.
just say I threw this out there because I love hearing each of you speak about these types of topics. And you inspire me, you challenge me, and I threw it out there to kind of frame what HLPTA really wants to do with these types of conversations is dive deeper and challenge ourselves. I was watching something today about the banned books situation that are going on, specifically in Florida, around Black history and about why people don't want other people to learn our own history. And one of the comments that was made is, people are talking about banning books from classrooms today, and these classrooms we were never supposed to even be in. And so that having seen that and heard that, and then knowing what you're going to be talking about today and what you do in these shows all the time, I just want to say thank you. I appreciate you. And I think Ron's power just went out. And that was it. I was going to bounce right now and not take up any more time, but I just really wanted to kind of frame some of the show and why HLPTA invests in this work because of that. I want all of our teachers and our students and community to understand that these are our classrooms together, and we all deserve to be seen.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Billy Joe. And this show, this is your baby too. So we're so thankful to start this with you. And I know you gave us a lot of credit when it comes to this show, but these topics come from our teachers, so we have to thank them for really knowing what they want. We're here to give it to them. So thank you so much for being here with
We have
us.
great teachers and members, and I'll be watching the show. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, Billy Joe. See you later.
See you
Bye.
later, Billy.
Not
Thank
off
you.
the hook yet. Okay, I think Ron's power is back, and he's back with us.
Well, my power is out, but I'm on my phone, so we're gonna do our best.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
All
I
right,
probably
so
should have
let's
stayed
go
in the
ahead and go
office.
back to our screen so we can finally bring our very patient guest who's been waiting to get on. We continue with this series, Embracing Diversity with Culturally Inclusive Teaching, and we are celebrating Black History Month and our author spotlight, Mr. Johnny Parker II, and we're going to ask what he prefers to be called, but we're going to let Ron go ahead and introduce him to us. Go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, so I'm just happy today to bring my dear friend and my partner in education, my dear brother Johnny Parker II, JP. So I've known JP for going on 18 years now. This is one of the first people I met when I moved to Los Angeles. I've had the privilege to be one of JP's closest best friends. We've taught at the same school for just a little under a decade before in South Central. We lived together. We've learned together. We've grown together. JP is an incredible educator, empathetic, loving, and caring with his students. He's cultivated spaces for students that love anime and gaming, students that think different and are different, but also find commonality amongst each other, something that has deeply inspired me. He's an incredible literacy rich educator where I've learned a lot of my teaching practices from and with alongside him. Someone that I've always been able to reflect with. And finally, he's a talented writer, content creator, comic book creator, and someone that is on the up and up, destined for greatness and already doing great things. So, JP, I'm happy you joined us, brother. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for the kind words. I appreciate it. Thank y'all for having me. Oh my gosh, thank you for the kind words, Ron. Good Lord.
Hey.
When I do pass on, you're definitely got to speak at the funeral. You definitely got to speak at the funeral. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Right back at you. Much love. And thank y'all again so much for having me today. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. So are we calling you JP? Are we cool now? So that we're gonna
We cool enough. We can go by
we're
JP.
friends now. Okay, I like it. I like it. Okay, that's what we're
We're
going
in a
with.
circle. In a circle.
JP, thank you so much for finding the time to be with us. We have heard tons, and we've studied all about you from Ron, and so we have your little picture here to remind us for him to tell us some stories. But he already started off awesome, and he had that all prepared, but that just came out so fluently because we know he means all of it. And so, everyone, our purpose today is to celebrate Black History Month by highlighting the importance of culturally inclusive teaching and diverse literature in the classroom. And of course, we have our special guest here today. So, our objective is to engage the audience in meaningful conversation with JP, a renowned writer, educator, and activist who will share his insights on how he uses his voice and his work to inspire positive change in the world. We're not going to read through this whole thing. We're just going to get started. Just know it's a lot of words, but we're so happy you're here with us. And we just want to, we always ground ourselves in purpose in every show. And these are our kids in our district, and representation matters. And these are quotes from our own students. I don't see myself in any of the books we read in class. Where are the stories of people who look like me and face the same challenges as me? Our students have actually said this. So I'm going to read another one. I feel like I don't belong in the school. The curriculum is so Eurocentric and ignores the contributions of other cultures and histories. I wish I could learn more about my own heritage and identity. We've heard students from all over say these kinds of things, right? So these are things we want to address. These are things we don't want our kids saying this. We don't want kids anywhere to feel this way. And that's why we're here today. Let's go ahead. And these are our own kids, a little selfishly, of course, but of course, these are our own. Why? Not our kids together. My son is on the left. This is my adorable 1-year-old over here. And then my daughter on the very right, my very sweet, when she was sweet, and then when she's not as sweet, because she's a teenager now. And Ron's beautiful daughter, Ron, I'm sorry. Ricardo's beautiful
That's my
daughter.
beautiful daughter, T-Rex, right?
Yeah, beautiful kids too. But this is Ricardo's daughter here in the middle. So,
and as I think about those quotes that we just read, right, I'm sure that I want a better world for my daughter when she gets into high school, when she starts reading those books, where she can see herself in those books. So definitely.
Yes.
And as we were, I wouldn't say stalking you, but researching and trying to find that info about you, JP. I mean, I was blown away, from your voice as a singer. Oh my God. I mean, in there, I mean, you at different comic book shows, right? You as a podcaster, everywhere. I found so much info, and I had to just come in here and share it really, really quick. So just some pictures and some quick videos in here of you.
Are we allowed to share these?
Some of these I've even seen before. Like, I do interviews and I'm like, okay, I'll see you later. Some of these are the first time I'm seeing as well.
All right.
They're definitely cool. I have to go track these down myself at some point.
And and as we were looking, of you as a writer, right? Just some of the covers, some of the amazing work that you have done that we're going to be discussing today. So we're really, really excited to talk to you about all of this amazing work that you do as a writer and educator.
Oh yeah, some of that work is stuff that I've done, and some amazing creators that I really admire a lot, and I'm definitely looking forward to talking to you about it.
I love it. All right, so just so you know, this is very casual. Please feel free. We go all over the place. We might not even get to all of our questions. We might add a lot more along the way. And Ron knows he's been through this already with us. He's going to just jump in from time to time at any time. But we have learned from him, and so we're going to do this to you. We just want to start off with, what is your story? And we'll start from there. So tell us a little bit about your story.
For sure. So I'm born and raised originally from Detroit, Michigan, and I guess I'll kind of tell the story of why I went to education. I also intersect that when I became a writer. So funny enough as it is, I remember in elementary school, I was around 3rd or 4th grade, and I was leaving school with some friends one day. We were talking about our futures, and I remember I repeatedly said, "I will never become a teacher." And And I was like, they were like, I was like, because I hate waking up early. I will never do this job. I was like, I want to wake up at 10 o'clock in the afternoon. That's my new start time. And so again, that was always really enough to go. And so growing up, my goal was always to kind of like pursue like law and writing. Like I was really advocate of, like, studying law and becoming a lawyer, while also get a chance to write and be creative and whatnot. And then back when I was a teacher, I did have some really dope teachers. But back when I was a student, I had a substitute teacher who was awarded in law school, and so was his wife. And they were like, they were the in-house substitutes who taught at our school, and it really stuck with me. Like when they announced he like passed the bar one day over the PA system, and so I was like, oh, I want to do the same thing. I want to, like, maybe I'll teach and like go to law school at the same time or whatnot. And so I went to college, went to University of Michigan, go Blue, national champions, good job, boys. Uh, and I remember like I was getting ready to do Rhodes School of Education, and I enjoyed the classes, enjoyed teaching a lot. And but at the same time, though, I was doing law internships, and I remember I did an internship in the public defender's office, and I went there and I absolutely despised it. Like it just turned me off to like
Oh,
the
thank
legal
goodness. Sorry.
system, and I saw how corrupt it was and how like the justice system actually works. And it's like there's no real fairness here. I was like, no, like I don't want to be a part of this. So I was a little bit of a loss about what I would do with my life. But that same semester was when I did my student teaching. And I went and did my student teaching and I had a blast. I love like being in front of students, putting like diverse curriculum in front of them and everything like that. Funny enough, my student teaching started in February during Black History Month. So one of the first lessons
Oh,
I did was a day of Black History where every day we learned about a different like person from Black History and what they had contributed and whatnot. And I remember I just like fell in love with the career and job. And I remember like my friends pointed out to me, they were like, you realize you come home every day and you talk about your students. And I was like, oh wow, yeah, I do.
oh.
And that's when I realized that I love teaching. I would be a lifelong educator from that point on. But at the same time, though, as being a teacher, I also knew I wanted to write as well. So growing up, I was an avid reader. I remember like my library gave away like all the books at one point, like all the old books, and I was a kid who went in like, "Ooh, this is free," and just started grabbing books. Peter Brown, Ripley, all these things like that. Put in my backpack. It's like all you had to say was free. Um, and funny enough as it was, though, is that like that's all it took. And I just went home that summer, and I was just demolishing book after book after book. And my Lexile score went up. I was doing better in my classes, and I became a lifelong reader. And then at one point, I discovered some comics in my basement that my dad had stored there like years ago. There's some old Superman and Batman's, and I just fell in love with the medium. But I never saw myself in it until I discovered a writer by the name of Dwayne McDuffie. Dwayne McDuffie is a talented writer who's also from Detroit, educated at the University of Michigan. But he's responsible for creating a diverse universe called Milestone for characters you might have heard of, like Static Shock. And so it was the first time that someone had created like a comic book company that was all about Black, brown, diverse characters, LGBTQI, like everyone was inclusive. And I was like, oh, wow, this is dope. Not only do these characters on the page look like me and they're telling stories that are similar to mine while I'm going to Detroit, but the creators behind this look like me too. And that was the first time I realized, like, oh, wait, I can tell these stories. And so it was at that point that I was inspired to be like, I want to write someday too. So after I finished my schooling at University of Michigan, I'm left there. I decided to move to LA because I wanted job placement. I also hated snow, and I was like, I'm done with this. Like, no more cold weather. Like, we're not waking up and cleaning up cars anymore. And so I came out here to LA, pursuing my dream not only of teaching, but of writing as well. And then, some years later, I went to a comic shop. I read an artist. I joked around about an idea. And lo and behold, that idea became a book we did together called Blackfist and Brown Hand. And I've been doing it ever since. And one of my goals is kind of do what Dwayne McDuffie did. I said, I want to tell diverse stories where when children read those stories, they see themselves reflected in that. So I try to tell inclusive stories that represent everyone and like everyone's experience as best I can to make sure they see a little bit of themselves in the stories that I write.
Well, that is a beautiful story. And what I hear is, a lot of students are going to see, your comics and your stories, and they are going to see themselves, and they might be inspired to do exactly what you did. They want to be writers too. They want to create these things too. So I love that. So that's a perfect segue actually into our next question. And our next question was, tell us more about your career as an educator today. So tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, for sure. So I started teaching first 2 years at Gardena High School, which was awesome. It was really cool and everything like that. Back in like 2006, 2007, me and Ron were teaching at this around the same time. That's when we lived together. And the thing about it is, was that like I loved Gardena. It was a dope time as an educator where I really got a chance to like start playing around with my curriculum, developing some things, figure out what I want to teach. Because I was given a lot of freedom. Like I remember one of the books that I taught was The Narrative Life of Frederick Douglass because I had like read it in college and I was like, this is an important book. I want to put this in front of my students. And the department and the principal at the time supported me, kind of gave me the freedom to explore. However, at the same time, though, that's when we were going to a recession as a country, and there's also just
Mhm.
massive layoffs happening within, like, the public education system. And at the time, I was generally worried about my job security. So thankfully, a friend of mine worked in a charter school by the name of Green Dot, was the organization's name in Animal, South LA. And she was like, "Well, would you like to come here? It's a little bit smaller school. There's more like 1-to-1 ratio. So like you are the teacher of like 10th grade or whatnot. So like we really can't lay people off. So it's a little bit more job security." So yeah, pretty much, yeah. So I decided to go there, and when I went there, I was lucky enough to like again be given some of that same freedom, a bit of freedom to develop my curriculum, freedom to play around the classroom, to like again bring in diverse stories for my students to read and play with and whatnot. And so when I did that, I began teaching diverse novels like Tears of a Tiger, The Bluest Eye. Recently, I've taught We Are Not From Here. Shout out to Mrs. Expedito who recommended that book to me. And so over my years of educating is teaching English, I've always tried to put diverse stories in front of my students while also putting stories in front of them that would challenge them as well they might be used to. So back on that picture I sent y'all earlier, like one of the things I've started teaching recently is graphic novels. I taught a novel by the name of Spinning by Tilly Walden, which is a really dope book that tells the story of this young girl as she moves from New Jersey to Texas, moving from a freely liberal environment to a more conservative environment. And she does this move, she's also beginning to like come out of the closet and explore her own identities. And it tells the stories and tribulations of what she goes through. So I love putting comics in front of my students because it kind of challenges the perception of like what is literature. Because a lot of
Mhm.
times our students get trapped in this mindset like, oh, it's just a book. But there's a
Right.
variety of different books out there you can connect with, a variety of different types of stories you can connect with. And I've always said reading is reading. There are books like The Watchmen that have extremely high lexile levels with words that you may not be used to that'll actually help you improve your reading or vocabulary. And so I've just tried to make sure I've exposed them to that. And then that's more in the classroom. But then outside of the classroom, one of the things I want to do is like create safe spaces because being into comics, anime, wrestling, so many different things, I'm kind of nerdy. And so the thing about this though is that I wanted to create a space for like those
You say
same
you
nerdy,
kind of nerdy.
kind of nerdy, kind of a little bit.
I love it. I love it.
I wanted to create a safe space for those students who were kind of the same way, where they can come together and like celebrate and be themselves, and they don't feel like they have to hide. So I started this club with the help of some students called Society of Games and Anime, or SOGA, which is the longest running club in my school at this point, going on for the past 17 plus years. And
Wow.
thank you, and it's been dope. And what's cool is that the club is more of a social environment where kids we come together, we play anime, we play video games, but we also just like took the students on diverse culture experiences. Like for a lot of kids growing up in South LA, they've never been out South LA. So we would do beach trips. It's like, all right, we're going to Santa Monica. Let's go check it out. We would go to Little Tokyo and actually go sample Japanese food like ramen and sushi, things they've been seeing in the animes and stuff they've been watching for a long time. When we go to the movies and to parks and also to Comic Cons and whatnot, so they can actually meet these creators who like read the stories and who create the stories that they watch and read all the time. And so it was a really great experience for me to like help those students out, like show them more of the world, but also give them a community. And it's really been dope to see what my students have done afterwards because of what we've done within Soga. A lot of my students have gone on to like emulate some of those things and values that we built there and carry it with them. One of my students started his own clothing brand called Slobo, which is a nerdy clothing brand, which is like really cool to see. He got a grant recently for like from the I think it was the Portland like Better Business Bureau for a few $1,000s or whatnot, and that was really great. He even came back and gave a donation to our school site. Another student started his own thing called Viva Gaming, which is just like Soga. It's like a video game club that meets after school, but he also brought in STEM as well, where they bring in STEM tutors to come teach people. So he started this organization. He's actually selling. He's actually partnering with school districts and doing this and whatnot. His name is Darvis. I'm really proud of him and seeing the stuff he's grown with that. And so it's
Darvis. I
cool to
remember
see.
that young man.
Oh yeah, do you remember Darvis? Yeah, he's dope.
Yeah.
And then other students have gone on to art school to do art that's socially conscious, that represents that love for anime and comics and whatnot, but is also culturally responsive too. Like one of our students, I refer to her as like me and Ron's like child in a way. She took a lot about arts that I pushed upon her and whatnot and those things, but a lot of the ethnic studies and the protests and like the standing up for your rights, she puts a lot of that stuff into her art and whatnot. So to be honest, the cool thing about it is though, is that being in that classroom and doing that club has helped me impact students in like a multitude of ways, not just inside the classroom, but like outside the classroom as well.
Shout
Wow.
out to Cynthia Navarro. Is that who you're talking about, JP?
Yeah, Cynthia. Yeah.
Yeah, Cynthia Navarro, who runs she does she's like one of the leaders of the education wing of Self Help Graphics. She does
Hmm.
incredible educational work with young students. Really inspiring to me
Yeah.
and to JP. Yeah.
Super proud of her. She's doing dope things.
I love that. My daughter is messaging me. She's watching the show and she's saying, "Can can I be part of a club like that? I'm like, I don't even know.
Oh,
She's starting high school next year, so
oh,
that's on her radar. So she was like,
That's
"He's so
cool.
cool." Okay, sorry, she's
Aw,
fanning
I
out a
love
little bit
that.
on the
thank
side.
you.
But before we move on to our next question, what are the demographics of the schools that you are teaching in? What types of demographics do you work with, and what kind of challenges or opportunities does that provide?
So at Animo South LA, like we have a demographic that's like it used to be honestly back when I first started about 50% Latino and 50% African American. But the past few years, because of changing demographics of the neighborhood, more charter schools opening up, it's still one of the few racially diverse schools within the Green Dot organization, where I would say probably now we're more like 80-20, 80% Latino, but 20% African American. But what's been dope though is that the opportunities that it gives us is conversation to talk about intersectionality a lot of times. So a
Mhm.
lot of times when I'm making book selections, I'm trying to choose books that represent the struggles of like both communities. But then when we read those books, we talk about like how does this like intersect and come to those other communities. Like for example, I'm in the middle of teaching The Bluest Eye right now by Toni Morrison, and it does a great job of talking about colorism and whatnot. But as we read that book, my supplemental text that I'm attaching to that book are articles about colorism in like Latino countries and things like that, and how does colorism play out in the Latino community and privilege there and whatnot, where people give a testimony about how like Latinos, people of lighter skin, do have more privilege and whatnot. And so just to show that intersectionality and show the students that like, no, we are all in this struggle together, and only we can only be successful when we help each other and understand each other's struggles and whatnot. And then so that's really dope. And then I also just recently taught again, go back to the book We Are Not From Here. Again, shout out to Mrs. SPD2 who gave me a recommendation for that book. It's a really great book that teaches the story of three children from Guatemala who like make the journey from Guatemala to the United States and all the trials and tribulations they go through. But for a lot of my African American students, that was the first time they had actually understood or got a glimpse of like what some of their classmates had gone through, what their families had gone through, which led to a different level of empathy and like understanding and whatnot and building a community there. So honestly, the cool thing about teaching within a diverse population is that you get a chance to have conversations that you may not always be privy to when a population is like more what's the word I'm looking for? More of the same in a way. So
Mhm.
it's the great
When
thing
it's
about
more homogeneous. Yeah.
thank you. That's what I think of homogeneous. Thank you. Appreciate you. So yeah, at least a lot of great intersectionality and a lot of great conversations that we normally would be able to have.
Yeah, and I
Well,
just
that's
wanted to
it.
add,
Go ahead.
could I
Go
add
ahead.
something? That I just wanted to
Yeah, of
add
course.
that, not only do you embody that in your classroom, but, whenever I stepped into Soga space, whether it was during lunch or after school, the students of different racial and ethnic groups were came together in the club. I think it was a space both for Black students and Latino students, and I think it provided one of those many opportunities for our students to learn from each other and come together with a common interest, gaming, anime, right, and other type of related interests that the students were able to see like, hey, we're not that, we have uniqueness and we have our own identities, but we also share a lot of the same interests, right? So a part of it is like getting them to see this larger like historical and political commonalities, right? Shared struggles, shared histories, but I think
Mhm.
also just the basic, right? Like we like similar popular culture, right? We like similar games. And I always loved that kind of community that you cultivated in that space, JP.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. And it's kind of crazy to see because doing that for the past like 17 years, it's crazy to see because now, especially after the pandemic, there's a huge influx of like, anime and manga and comics and like pop culture and
Mhm.
cartoons and whatnot. But the crazy thing about it is that like a black and like by our own interest in those things has always existed. But it's always crazy because like me and my friends joke that we were like the Rosa Park black nerds or coming up and everything like that, going to those spaces like talking about anime and bringing that out to the masses and everything like that. And what's dope now is that when we go on TikTok and whatnot and see all those things, is that we get to see like a lot of like black and brown kids who are some of the influencers in those areas now, sharing their love without having to be worried about like being judged for it and everything. So it's really cool to see. And that was again something that, as Ron said, like kind of started as I kind of did in Soga on a daily basis about again just creating a space where like everyone can come together with just shared interests and that be celebrated and not have to worry about like being judged or anything along those lines and just realizing that it doesn't matter what our backgrounds are, we all love the same things and that's enough for us to bond and like come together and start those conversations.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Thank you, Ron. That too. So, in our next slide, you kind of already answered the first question. The question was, how do you bring diverse authors and literature into your classroom? But I think you can touch upon it again. But I know you've touched upon that in the last question. But my real question here is, what advice do you have for other educators who are trying to do the same?
Mm. There's a lot of great ways to like to kind of go about this. Like one way I would just say is definitely like for one, if you want to use graphic novels in your classrooms, one of the best things to do is one, go talk to your local librarians. Like I recently came back from ALA,
Mm.
the American Librarian Association conference, and the thing about it is that librarians are looking at what kids are reading a lot of times, and they're always trying to find high interest novels with diverse storytellers. So I would say always just utilize your local librarians. They have a lot of like access to like a lot of dope novels and things that you may not have considered that they've seen kids devour. So they're great people to go to for recommendations. Secondly, I would just say just always look at the population of the students you're teaching, because part of the reason why I choose my novels is that I look at the population of the students that I'm teaching and I want to make sure that they have literature going to reflect them. At the same time, though, I also want to challenge them as well, because again, I always want to bring in that intersectionality of showing that like we all go through struggles that we need to understand. So, for example, I always like I love to teach Night by Elie Wiesel and talk about like the Holocaust and talk about again like a lot of the pressure we go there, and then talk about how does that relate to like some things we see in today's world still. So I would just say that definitely look at your populations and try to find culturally diverse literature that reflects the populations that you're teaching, but also challenge your students as well by bringing in perspectives that they may not see that also have connections to them as well. And then for myself, I again just try to find things I think are going to connect with my students and the things they're going through. So go back to the example of spinning. Over the past few years, we've had more and more students who are identified with the LGBTQI community, but they're also feeling comfortable coming out of their school. So when I saw that, I was like, "Yo, I need to make sure they have literature that kind of addresses their needs as well. Something's going to like spark them. Something's going to represent what they're interested in as well." And teaching spinning has been incredibly powerful for a lot of my students, because for a lot of them, it helped them like it showed them that again, one, it was allyship, whether it at least showed them that oh, there's a teacher here who's going to support me, and not just by words but with actions as well. And furthermore, it also just kind of like gave them like an insight to like what they were going to as well, because they saw that character of Tilly, who's based on a real person because it's a memoir, go through her struggles. It's like, oh, this is what I'm going through, and it helped them like
Mhm.
deal with it a little bit better for themselves as well. And I hope that helps. But I also just recommend too, if you want to teach comics in your classroom, last thing I'll say is go to comic shows. There's great comic shows happen here in LA, like WonderCon. There are a lot of publishers there, like IDW. Sometimes we get Oni Press down here, and they have a lot of amazing graphic novels. And a lot of times they like to partner with schools too, though. And so there's again, for example, Oni
Oh.
Press has a great series called Scott Pilgrim that's very popular among our students. It's on Netflix right now. And again, they love to do like sometimes things where they partner with schools. So sometimes by going to those comic shows, those booths and saying, "Hey, I'm an educator. What would you recommend for my classroom?" Or what can we do? They'll love to partner with you. Sometimes even let authors come in and speak to your classes as well. So I would say sometimes if you're interested in teaching graphic novels, consider going to those comic shows and going to talk to those publishers, those editors there, and let them know that you like to work with them if possible.
That is great advice. I didn't think of I mean, it just seems so simple, but I didn't think of some of those things if I were to go back and try to teach. Yeah, oh, wow. And what I loved is what you said, we know we should look at the population of students that we're teaching, but what you said is we should also challenge them as well. So that's something to keep in mind. And yeah, it's something very anyways. Ah,
Oh
my
no,
brain was like exploding right now. Thank you so much. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to our next question, if you don't mind. Ron, feel free to interject, of course. So this is actually a two-part question, even though it's a simple question. It is tell us about your journey as a writer and author. And we were chatting with Ron earlier, and we kind of want you to start off in talking about your journey as a self-published writer and author, and take us through that. And Ron will interject at any time right now, because this is an amazing journey and we want to hear all about it. So please tell us
for
about
sure.
your journey.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, Ron, jump in and let me know if I leave anything out because you've been here for most of it. So uh So it's weird enough that like this February is actually marking the 10-year anniversary of like me beginning my comics journey. And so me actually doing my first self-published book. So as I mentioned earlier, I always knew that I wanted to write. But the thing about it is though, comics are a little bit difficult to break into because there's no like how-to guide, especially when I was coming up. It's back in the 2006 time period. Like today, there's a lot of like college programs that have like where you get master's degrees in comic studies and things on those lines, or get your bachelor's in those things. And a lot of great schools are supporting like a lot of up and coming creators with that. However, at the time I didn't have that, so there's no like step-by-step guide. I knew I wanted to write, so I just knew I had to be in LA, and also knew I just needed to be in a comic shop because I need to be involved in that community. So thankfully, I found a comic shop that would put on a lot of creator events that were geared towards getting you started. They did this cool event called 24-hour Comic Day, which happens around September, October every year, where the goal is to sit down and in 24 hours you create a comic. And so going there, and I actually got to meet some really incredible people we went on to be very successful later on in the industry. At my second free 24-hour comic day, I met Robert Rodriguez, who's the character designer of Spider Gwen from the Spider Miles Morales movies. He's the one who designed her costume and designed the character and everything like that. And I met him like again 50 years ago when he was still beginning his career and journey and everything like that. I got to meet him way back then. But I also met other creators who have been coming too. And because we're all on that same journey, we're all kind of supporting each other. And so while I was at that shop, I met an artist and we were just joking around and cracking jokes about like, oh, what would this be like and this and that. And that's about it was about the jokes we were cracking was like, what if the Hulk was black and what would that be like? And just like, just making like foolish jokes about it. But that led to a book that we did together called Blackfist and Brown Hand. There was a book that kind of like the challenges stereotypes, but also in a comedic way, while also exploring solutions to the problems of racism and prejudice and whatnot. And that all came about because I went to that comic shop. I was in the right place at the right time, talking to people, and I found myself an artist who was willing to create with me, which would be one of my main pieces of advice is that like if you're an up and coming person who wants to create comics, find people, find your community, and in the build that and find people who want to collaborate with you. And your stories that you tell don't have to be these great graphic novels. They can just be as almost like a 3-page story or like a 10-page story. Start small and then build from there. And so we started Blackfist and Brown Hand. I put out the very first issue. I wrote it. He drew it. It was funny enough was when we did the first issue, we just did it black and white. It was really just kind of thrown together. And then when we did our very first signing, we sold out, which is like, oh my gosh, like, oh, this is so cool. And so people came and like bought all the copies and it was like really exciting. And it was like, and then the cool thing too was the feedback that we were given. And that people said they loved the book, they thought it was funny. It was like, okay, so what do we do now? Well, I guess we got to build from here. So next thing we did is we did redesign the book. We changed the logo. We put it in color. We started going to comic shows, and the book kept being sold, and people liked it. And so at that point, it was like, all right, we have a good idea, so let's build upon it. So I did issue 2 and issue 3. And then with that book too, like I said, I love the challenge, like stereotypes and whatnot. Like the second issue is called Blackfist and Brown Hand 2, Secret of the Horchata, which is all about food deserts within the black and brown community and lack of food opportunities and whatnot. Then the third issue is called The Attack of the Slavery Tomatoes, where I explore the farm workers movement and how sometimes like some people as they're crossing the border are taken by evil coyotes to like plantation at the work, which is almost a form of like modern day slavery and whatnot. And so each of those issues just came about because again we kept building upon one, building upon another, and then as we did this, we would go to comic shows like WonderCon, LA Comic Con, and places like that to go sell our wares. And again, further build my community. As I'm doing these shows, I'm always going to talk to people and meet them and ask them for advice or what they're working on. I'm building friendships that can later lead to other opportunities. And so I self-publish those books over the years, try submitting them to publishers. But again, with some of the things we were talking about, the racial issues and things on those times, not every publisher is like comfortable actually like publishing that. So we began to self-publish, but again, found a lot of success. And then what I like to do too is with myself is that I have more stories I want to tell. I have like horror stories and romance stories and things like that. So over the next few years, I continue to tell stories with different writers. One of the stories that I began to tell is this one right here called Broken. It's my all ages book that tells which it's a love letter to my love of video games and anime. And so I wrote that book. And what was really cool is that when I put out the first issue, it was also successful. A lot of people bought it. I sold it for the very first time at San Diego Comic Con, and people resonated with it. They bought it, which led to me doing a graphic novel with it later on, and lead to a lot of other cool things. And then over the years, I continue to tell more stories and more comedy based things like this one right here. It's called Ewoks Are Better Than Hobbits, a little comedy book I put together based on my theory that what took the Hobbits 5 years to do, Ewoks get done in 3 days. But just like a fun story. It's true. It's true. The Ewoks are effective to get things done. And so I began telling more books and telling things as I went to shows. I would talk to editors and I would pitch ideas and continue to build a fan base of people who supported me and saw my work. And things continue to go and progress forward. And then I say one of the major chipping points, weirdly enough, is 7 years ago when I bought like my first newish car. And I remember when I bought this car, I was pulled over about 8 times in the first month. And I was just really angry and really infuriated. And I was like, dude, like, this is just ridiculous. And I live in SoCal. I live in like the South Bay and whatnot. So I was
Mhm.
getting over in like El Segundo, Manhattan Beach, Redondo Beach, and those areas a lot. Yeah, I'm calling you out by name. I'm calling you out.
Mm.
But the thing about it is though is that like I was so angry at the time, so I sat down. I was like, I need to get this out, and so I also used my writing as a form of therapy too. And that's when I wrote the book right here, "The Black Man's Guide to Getting Pulled Over." When I first wrote that book, again, like I say, he's like, if you want to be a creator, you should just write. So I told it as a little floppy zine. It was like foldable artwork. I found an artist to draw it for like $150. Again, somebody who's an art student, just like to slap something together for him really quickly. But I just want to tell the story while also giving advice for people when they get to these similar situations, and also find a way to create change myself and fight back against the system. So I wrote this book. And when I put it out, which is really cool, similar to Black vs. Brown Hand, like a lot of people bought the book and it stood out to them. It's like, oh, this is really dope. And then based upon like feedback I got from people, it's like, you should do more with this. So I took that little zine that I put out and then I expanded to an actual comic with like full page panels, storytelling, added some different things to it and elements, and whatnot. And then when I put that out, people resonated with even more because I had even larger audience to go to. And then later on, which ended up happening because again, I would put this book out and whatnot. I remember it was June 2020 when George Floyd passed away. I actually gave away the book for free during that time period to support the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. So I was like,
Mm.
please buy the book and give away, just give whatever money you can, whatever you want and whatnot. And people came and downloaded the book, they shared it, got the information out there by it, and we raised over like $1,000 for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. I believe it was like $1,100, $1,200, which is really dope.
Wow.
What was cool is that at that same time, though, like because the book had gotten around, someone came to us was like, "Yo, this needs to be with a publisher," and I was like, "Yeah, I think so too." So someone recommended a publisher to me by the name of Microcosm. They're based in Portland, and they're a really awesome, creator-friendly publisher. And they saw the
Okay.
book and they're like, "Yo, this is cool. We would love to put this out. Can we work with you and do this?" And they did, and so it was really cool. And they're not a typical comic publisher. They put it into comic shops, but also bookstores as well. So that book made to those avenues was helped to get to like a lot of different bookshops and places across the country and the world. And then as my journey continues, I'm still writing, I'm still telling stories and whatnot. But because of that, I'm able to get into different comic shows like Emerald City Comic Con, San Diego Comic Con, TCAF, and other places. And as I go there, I'm meeting new editors and new people. And eventually, I met a person by the name of Jazz, who's a close friend of mine, and she had a position at IEDW, and she was one of the editors on Transformers and Godzilla, all this stuff. And she comes to me, she says, like, "Hey, do you have a story to tell with one of these characters?" And I was like, "You know what? Let me give it a shot." And I gave my pitch, and thankfully she liked it. Toho, the people who own Godzilla, liked it. IDW liked it. And now, 10 years later, I have a book coming out with them, Mothra versus Modera, which is hitting shelves February 21st. And so that's kind of like my writer's journey, like summarized and whatnot. But I would just say, just like, it's a lot of me just like continue to self publish, continue to grind and push forward, expand my network, look for opportunities. And honestly, just about being patient and continuing on the path because there's a lot of times where I could have, a lot of times where I see creators who like give up or stop or whatnot, but everything's a journey. And the cool thing about it is that if I hadn't gone through those steps or whatnot, I wouldn't be where I am now because the cool thing about writing all those stories and doing those things and self publishing made me a better, stronger writer to the point where I am now, where I'm able to write a book like my Mothra versus Modera, and I feel confident in it. I feel it's going to be a good story that people will resonate with.
Wow, that's an amazing journey and very inspiring too for those of us who might be interested in doing the same thing and don't really know where to start or don't even know if it's possible. And I'm gonna give Ron a moment here to interject a little bit because I know he's witnessed your journey there, and he might have questions too that he'd like to share so that you can share some stuff with us. So go for it, Ron.
Yeah, thanks, Teresa. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing with us, JP. It's really cool to hear that story, and to hear the idea of like sticking with it, and building, like putting in the work, because sometimes it's like we think, oh, well, you write a story, you put it, you send it to a publisher, and you're waiting for the publisher to write you back to say like, we have picked you, right? But what I love about your story is like you've been out here hustling, meeting people, one on one, getting the stories out there at Comic Cons all across the country, and then that's brought new opportunities for you and to you. And yeah, so I think that's really inspiring. And I think it's something that our students can also learn from. How have you been able to share this story with young folks? And you mentioned, earlier that some of your former students are also writing themselves, or artists, or creating themselves. So can you tell me a little bit about that, the way that how have you brought your journey as a writer into the classroom and encouraging your students to be writers? Because I know for me, ethnic studies helped me to see myself as a scholar when teachers before and institutions before didn't didn't do that, so yeah, so how have you been able to share that story with young folks?
Um, so the way that I generally approach it is that I'm kind of honest with my students when I tell them I'm a writer. So at the beginning of every school year, it's funny enough, I tell them on the syllabus, and I even show a little slide on a PowerPoint. Was like, by the way, I'm also a writer. So when I give you feedback, it's not just as your teacher, but it's also as a professional as well. It always kind of cracks me up because I tell them this, and they're all just sit there like, and then I was like, Mister, you write comics? I told you on the first day. And it's like, I wasn't listening, Mister. I was just sitting there, but you do, and it's like. And it always just kind of cracks me up, and it always happens like every single year. And so I'm transparent with them. I even keep my books in the front of the classroom. And what's cool is that my students, especially over the years, have been there, been witness like parts of my journey as I've grown as a writer. And I've told them as well, it's like, things take time, you have to grind, you have to put in the work and whatnot. And so students have seen me do like short films, like other things as an experiment and whatnot. And they've been there, been part of things. Sometimes I even shot things at the school site. But my students have got a chance to witness and just hear my story. And what's dope is that some of them have been inspired by it to go out and do their own things. Like years ago, I had a student by the name of Aldo who saw my writing, saw things I was doing or whatnot. I would give him feedback on his writing or whatnot. And he said he wanted to pursue film. And again, so proud of this kid. He ended up making a short film that got into Cannes Film Festival. And it was like really dope. And it was awesome for him to do that. I was like, dude, this is awesome. This is so cool.
Wow.
So proud of him and everything like that. And so that's part of the reason why I share my story with him. Then with my other students, I always like the kids who like show an interest in being creative and who want to pursue the arts and whatnot. Because there was a long time at our school site where we didn't have our art classes and whatnot because there was a drainage of that within the urban education community. And so my club slogan was an outlet for artists and whatnot. Where would they come in there? We would do drawing sometimes, or we would talk about the stories that they want to tell and things like that. And that was part of the reason why I took them on field trips to comic shows and things along those lines. So that way they could see creators that look like them, Black and brown creators, and they could also get a chance to talk to them and get advice about how they can pursue those things even if they don't have art classes at their school. And so that's the one way that I've always approached it. And then more recently, I've taken a more direct route. These past couple of years, I've actually started a comic creator club at my school site. With
Okay.
we were really blessed to get this amazing art teacher by the name of Mr. Fan. He's an amazing, talented art teacher, and he's actually made a comics himself as well. And so I went to talk to him. Was like, hey, how would you feel about doing a club after school, where we can try to mentor students in this process, of, like becoming comic creators themselves. And so the past couple of years, we've been doing that, and we've seen some good success with it. And we're actually getting ready to publish our first book coming this year and whatnot. And it's really dope, and I'm excited for it because those kids are actually get an opportunity to be actual published authors and professionals within the community as well. And so that's just like one way that I've kind of gone about these past couple of years. But then lastly, also within my own classroom as well, is that anytime that I get a chance to teach one of our more creative writing classes like composition, generally at the end of the year, I'll encourage our students to actually publish a book. So we'll take all of their best pieces and whatnot. I'll go to my principal, ask for the funds. I have one of my friends to graphic design it, and they will actually publish a book and put it out there so they get to leave with something. So they get that feeling of actually being a published author, so they can realize that their stories matter and their stories are important and their voices are important. And again, like I said, it's always cool to see where kids go with that after they leave my classroom. Some of them actually go and pursue careers within the creative arts, which is dope to see. But even then, some of them just have the more confidence in themselves as writers and hopefully as people. Fingers crossed.
Oh my gosh, it's such amazing opportunities that I think I wish more of our kids were able to receive, and hopefully, and hearing from you, this inspires teachers to do the same. So I'm going to go a little bit of out of order right now. I'm going to jump to our last question because it kind of goes along with what we're talking about right now. Um, so, what advice do you have for teachers who want to encourage students who want to be writers, artists, podcasters, and creators? What advice do you have for teachers? How can we be like you? I guess that's my
Oh,
question.
well, you get zero sleep, and
Oh, okay.
uh,
Check.
uh,
You stay on the ground.
but honestly, I would say the most important thing to do is For one, if you want to do an after school capacity, just create the space, and create the time. Like it'd be as small as just one day a week. Because for a long time, Soga met every Friday after school from about the time we get out to about 5:30. But by creating that space, it just created a safe space where students could come, be creative, and do those things and whatnot. And so, if you want to do a more after school capacity, I would say simply create a space and tell students what you want to do. And it's one of those things, almost like Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. Um, if you tell students you want to do a creative club, they'll show up, and then talk to your students, ask them, okay, so what is it that you want to do? And then you just kind of work with them. And again, it can be grassroots. It doesn't always be kind of fancy. Like I remember, like what came to Soga, a lot of stuff we found was through parent donations, us like legit them bringing in things, us finding like the most random scraps of stuff to get our club started with. But then over the years, we fundraised and got more funds. Officially got later on, we got actual official sponsorship from the school, which led us to having more materials and more resources. But I would say the first thing to do is just start and create space for it. And then as far as your actual classroom, there's a lot of cool projects and whatnot, project-based learning that centers around things along those lines of like comics and like, for example, podcasting. And so, for example, a good friend of mine by the name of Peter Carlson has a great unit about he does with his ninth grade freshman class that starts off the year about what it means to be a hero and what the stories look like. And it's all centered around comic books. And so if you want to look that up, you can find that from Peter Carlson. It's a free unit that he gives out to all teachers. So if you ever want to do that, and the cool thing about that project is at the end of the unit, the students create their own superhero and they create their own comic. And so it kind of has that building activity for that. So that's another thing to give them as well. But also, there's a bunch of great resources out there for like doing podcasts in your classrooms. And podcasts are great summative demonstrations of students' knowledge. So a lot of times you can give students a project and you'll be surprised at what they do and what skills they learn by doing this. Last year, I did a hip hop is poetry unit, and one of the culminating demonstrations for it was doing a podcast. And it was so cool to see my student go out and do this. And when she came back, she's like, Mister, I learned how to edit. I learned how to incorporate music. I learned this, and this, all these skills. Again, and sometimes they know these things that they're on TikTok, all this stuff, but sometimes they get a chance to go improve themselves. And you should have seen how proud she was that she was able to do this. And it's about creating the space for it. And I'll be real with you, everybody, it may fail at first.
Thank you for
It
saying
might
that.
not work the first time.
But you just got to keep doing it. Do it again. You refine it. You get better. You can't be scared of failure. So I would just say, just take a shot, throw it out there, and then when you see what happens the first year, look at what went well, look what went not so well, and then refine it. It gets better year after year after year. But just by creating those spaces for those
Word.
opportunities for students, it can lead to a lot of great blossoming experiences for them.
Can I add something too? I mean, in your case, JP, you a published author, published writer. You in the game, you doing the work. But something that
No sleep.
I had
No
to
sleep.
learn how to, something I had to learn to embrace is like modeling for students positive self-talk, right? And so, like, for example, if you as a teacher say, hey, you know what? I'm an artist. I'm a visual artist. I'm not selling paintings, but I identify as an artist because I know that I have a creative vision in my mind, and I know with the proper support and help and supplies, I can create an art piece that tells a story. Or same thing when you can do that positive self talk as a writer. I'm not a published writer, but I am a writer. I've written in colleges, universities. I've written this. I've written that. I've published this piece, right? And so, like, I think some of those ways that we can model for our kids to create, whether it's an academic identity or an artistic identity or a creative identity, I think that's a really important piece, and when students see themselves reflected in us, I think that's where it becomes a even more powerful experience. And so I've loved watching you do that. I've loved watching you model that for kids, and I've learned to embrace some of those pieces as well when I work with young people.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And it low key reminds me of a phrase I always tell kids whenever we give like any creative journey. And it's also advice I also give to other people who say they want to do who are aspiring comic creators themselves. I always tell them the exact same thing. You can always make something better, but you can't make something from nothing. And so the simple thing is just to put yourself out there and just take that first step and just create something because you can always improve upon it, you can always refine it. But the thing about it is, if you sit down and just don't actually put anything out there, you'll have nothing to show for it because you were scared to take that chance. So you can always make something better, but you can't make something from nothing. Put yourself out there, take the chance, and positive things will come back.
That's beautiful. I feel like that needs to be framed. Not just for our students, but also for us teachers who are watching the show as well. And to your point too, Ron, that positive self-talk. I know teachers are the best at imposter syndrome, beginner friend. We don't feel like we're good at anything, but we're here to show the kids that they can do it, but we in ourselves are not exuding that. So so very, very good point. Thank you. And so I just a little. I know we only have about 5 minutes left, but Ricardo did show a little bit of the slide. So we did our roots of the show is a tech show, and so we did want to kind of talk about what we've been doing with our ethnic studies classes, and we've been
Oh,
using this
cool.
tech all around. So Ricardo, did you want to talk a little bit about this? And
I think Ron can introduce it, but I think it goes hand in hand with the this particular book that you wrote. Ron, do you want to go ahead and start, and I'll kind of add in there?
Sure, I'll start. I mean, I just want to say, I came to district 5 months ago, and I have learned so much from the technological work that you bring into the classroom. I oftentimes say, like, I'm old school, kind of paper pen, art supplies on paper, but I am learning to embrace this new technology. And I got to experience for the first time last week the Oculus glasses virtual reality experience of actually being immersed in the 1963 March on Washington, where Dr. King delivered the famous "I Have a Dream" speech, and it was incredible, Ricardo. It really was. I took off the Oculus glasses when I was done, and I was emotional thinking that this is a possibility, this frontier in bringing technology with ethnic studies. I'm gonna pass it to you because
Yeah,
y'all were the ones that led the
yeah.
lesson.
JP, as I think about your book and I think about my personal experiences, the first car that I bought, I was telling Ron about this, my 1980 Dodge Omni. But after that, I said, I'm always going to have a nice car. So I bought a BMW when I finished college. I've been stopped many times for no reason. Coming home, I've been stopped with my daughter in the back of the car, right? So as tech as our job is to bring technology and to enhance what our amazing teachers are already doing. So we brought in this experience called MLK, The Time Is Now, where basically we travel through history and we bring it through life, and our students got to actually march and be part of the march. And as they are listening to Dr. Martin Luther King, they get to experience three different scenarios. The first one is how difficult it is to own a house for a person of color. The second one, which is the most impactful in my opinion, is what it feels like to be stopped by a police officer. And I'm actually going to I'll play a part of it so you can actually see what it looks like. So our kids are actually immersed in this and they get to actually experience this.
We already know that. We don't have to say if this happened. We can say when this happens.
When this happens.
There will be a time when you get pulled over by a cop. I'm not telling you this to scare you. You are my child, and I'm trying to prepare you for what might happen. You are smart and powerful, and through the wrong eyes, that and your skin color can make you appear as a suspect. So when you do get pulled over, I'm going to need you to remember the sound of my voice. Remember the calm in my tone. Remember that you getting home to me safely is all that matters.
And I won't play it all, but our kids are actually get to experience. They're actually sitting in the seat, the driver's seat, and they have to keep their hands as they are with virtual reality on the wheel, right? So our kids get to experience this, what it feels like, and finally they get to actually see some of the injustices with voting rights. So our kids got to experience this as they listen to Dr. Martin Luther King do his "I Have a Dream" speech. And I wanted to share what the experience was like from our students after we had finished. So I'll play this video that we created just to
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his iconic "I Have a Dream" speech. With 4 words, he inspired the nation with his dream of a better future. While the breadth of his speech touched on a variety of issues that plagued Black Americans, his demands of never being satisfied with inequities in housing, policing, and voting echo familiar conversations of our present. Let's examine how Dr. King's words are more relevant today than ever.
Our experience, I feel like it helped me grasp more the learning. As a person who is more of a visual learner, this really helped me.
It showed how voting could be more difficult for different people, especially people of color.
I think it's a easier way of learning things, and it's like a fun way of learning things too, and you still learn about it.
my favorite part I want to say was probably like I like all three of them, all three of the things we did, but I want to say the board game was really cool. It looked like I was in a real, like, it felt really real, like I was actually there.
Yeah, and to be able to bring these experiences to our students, right, Ron, and to be able to put it together with what our amazing ethnic studies teachers are already doing in the class has been amazing for us, but also for our students, I think.
So I think when we saw the title of your book, The Black Man's Guide to Getting Pulled Over, that just kind of resonated because we just did this recently. So we're just embracing these opportunities to, like you said, show our kids. You said over here how we're the same, but also challenge them to see different perspectives and things like that. So we appreciate all the things you do. We wish we had more time to pick your brain. I selfishly would like to learn so much more, but I will be stalking you a bit if you're okay with it. And my daughter's already a fan. She's already looking up your things right now. She's texting them to me. So thank you so much for the time, JP. We appreciate you, and we appreciate all you do. And you inspire us to make a difference in our classrooms too. So thank you. And Ron, thank you for allowing your friend to come join us, and we appreciate the connections.
For sure. And thank you so much for having me. And thank you for the work that y'all are doing too, though. That virtual reality experience looks amazing. And it looks like, again, like a powerful experience for our students to like learn and experience something that a lot of times they're going to read a book. So thank you for creating that, putting that for them. That looks amazing.
Thank you. Any last remarks, JP, before we end our show?
Again, thank you so much for having me. And then I'll actually be in the San Gabriel Valley this coming February 21st. So anybody who's around, actually be doing a signing where I'll be selling my books in person on February 21st. My Godzilla book comes out, so I'll be at Nostalgia Comic Shop. So feel free to come through. You can find me there. I'll be signing my books in person. And then I didn't get a chance to talk about it as much, but the Black Man's Guide, its final iteration, is actually a curriculum. Actually added lesson plans and things to the back for teachers who want to use in their classroom, where it has activities, worksheets, guided things to help them out if they want to use this book in their classroom. So please you can find me on Instagram, Twitter at JohnnyP313. So please feel free to contact me if you'd be interested in ordering like a class set for your classroom or whatnot and things of those lines. But again, most importantly, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure being here, and I hope to talk to y'all again in the future.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for tuning in. We will see you again in our next episode. Bye everyone.
Bye. Take care.
You.